Good afternoon and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast, formerly the Libertarian Counterpoint podcast. We are coming at you on Christmas Eve, the 24th of December for 2020. It's been kind of an interesting year so far, but we have a special treat for us going into Christmas here. We have a special show where we are going to be interviewing James Just, who ran for the California Assembly District 7 here, and that's located in Sacramento. And let me introduce you now to the panelists. So up in our on our upper left-hand corner, or excuse me, I guess up on top, you can see we have James Just. He's who we're going to be interviewing today. And just below him, we have Leon the Word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. And just below me, we have our Screaming Eagle of Freedom, Tim Everett, who is a pilot in the state of California. And I'll be your host today.
On the bottom of the
yeah, our eagle's been grounded today.
On this show, you guys can call me Jabbering James.
There you go.
Jabbering James.
You got me jabbering. But anyways, yeah, my name is Jason McPhee. I'll be your host today, and so let's jump right into that interview. And you can see as well, we've got a map up just so you can kind of see where this is at. It's the district is in Sacramento, California. And but let's jump into the interview. So James Just, he recently ran this last November. He was on the ballot here in Sacramento, and he ran for, again, Assembly District 7. He's also holds a position in the local Sacramento Libertarian County as vice chair. So with all that, he's also, as well, just as a disclaimer, he also directs our show for us as well. So he's kind of got his hands in a little bit of everything nowadays. But
we are just forced to say nice things about him.
Hey, it's all well deserved. But anyways, as far as that goes, let's find out a little bit more about James and his experience. So one of the things we kind of want to do with this is we want to give it a chance for anybody who may be out there thinking about running for office. Maybe they're sick of the way things are. They want to figure out how they can make a change. Well, I mean, the first step is to kind of find out how people who've tried to do this and have done it, the steps they took. So let's find out a little bit more from James about that. So James, why did you decide to run for office?
Well, first I want you to point out, for those of you who can't see, but look at that map, and gerrymandering is still very much alive despite the California Commission. It is, for those of you who don't know, the California Redistricting Commission was supposed to solve it, but you look at that map and it's redistricting hasn't been solved. The Redistricting Commission operates off of a list that the legislature gives them. So the legislature still decides how maps look. Whether we think it does or not, the legislature does, and my map is proof. It goes all the way from Rio Linda and Alberta, which is a very rural community, to downtown Sacramento, and the chunk cuts off part of Sacramento that is more relatable. And they are forcing groups of people to be represented together who aren't natural communities. And so you end up getting 25% of the people who simply don't feel heard because their representatives don't have to listen to them. And we ended up with 26%, which is going above our weight. But I ran because gig workers asked me to, fundamentally. I can remove this, play my gig workers asked me to run. AB5 was such a disaster. And I was a gig worker, and I got to talk to all my fellow gig workers a lot, rideshare drivers, app-based gig workers mainly. For me, they asked me to run because AB5 was disastrous, and it destroyed our lives, not just our incomes, our livelihoods. A lot of the times we take less money so we can work the way we want.
And James, let me just jump right in. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, AB5 was an assembly bill that went into effect here at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2020, rather, I should say. And essentially, it restricted people doing gig work, saying that they had to become a full-time, or not necessarily full-time, but they had to become employees of the company that they were working for, instead of being, I guess, independent contractors. It was really aimed at Uber and Lyft. And oddly, they've sort of found an escape hatch now.
Well, oddly enough, it wasn't aimed at Uber and Lyft. It was Uber and Lyft were the excuse to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
It wasn't. If you go look at the thing, it wasn't aimed at Uber and Lyft at all. It was aimed at all those other. It was aimed at court reporters and musicians and artists and everybody else. It's just they used Uber and Lyft as the excuse.
But it was for your own good. They did
good, exactly.
Yes, I need to be so protected from these big evil corporations that I must now have a tighter relationship with them. I don't understand the thought process.
Exactly.
Well, you know, the scary thing is that, you know, there's been all these different people who've looked for exemptions to AB5, and they've gotten a lot of them here in California for different industries. And yet the Democrats, for all of the trouble this is making, they want to take this thing national as well. You know, I think they're seeing it as a way to try and unionize more people. And it's really, you talk about a way to restrict people from easily getting back into the workforce in a time when they've just shut everybody down and ruined businesses right and left. I can't think of a worse idea than AB5. But anyways, yeah.
It creates another barrier to the workforce entry.
The mismanagement that are going on in these blue states. All these laws that they pass that restricting business activity and all that sort of things. But before we jump off here, James, I want to go back to something you said about these the boundaries of districts, which in California is supposed to be determined by the commission. But you're saying the politicians are still determining those boundaries, and how is that happening then? Which is a little mystifying to me to hear. Well, I didn't even know that was the case.
Well, I was part of the districting commission 10 years ago, last time they did it, and I made through the first 4 rounds. And I dropped out when we got the list of conditions that the legislature had us working under. It was essentially a Democrat wish list of how to design a district. You go by race and gender and income, rather than you, like for most people, you just common interests and natural barriers, right? That's how you draw a district.
Yes.
Yeah, people in Sacramento downtown, you keep them together, and people in rural areas, you keep them together, and you use things like rivers, freeways, you know, gorges, that kind of thing, as where barriers go.
Yes.
But that's not what we do. We use demographic issues and racial issues and economic things, and it's all based upon, and you get like this list. I think it was like 26 criteria that you had to go through before you can design a district. Now they may do it differently this time. One of the things I talked to the professionals down at the professional bureaucrats who run these things. I was talking to them about this time last year, and they've now understood that the legislature took more authority than they actually really should have had, and so maybe the professional bureaucrats, now that they know what they're doing because they've been through the once, that they can actually, you know, stand up to them some more. But essentially the legislature tells them what the conditions they work under. So the legislature tells them what conditions they work under.
Okay. Got it.
And just more craziness. But it's interesting how many things you have your hands into, because, you know, once again, you had some experience on this as well.
Yeah,
so it's really interesting. But so tell us a little bit about how you did. What were the results of your run?
Well, we got 26%, which is actually pretty good. It's punching above our weight. We raised less than $4,000. I think it was $3,200. I'll have to actually go back and look, but it was less than $4,000. And so it's 26%. Just to give you some context, other libertarians that ran up here in Northern California, now they were in the Bay Area, so they have actually even tougher road to hoe than I did, but they got 11%. And so when it comes about libertarians, we figure our floor was about 15. And so we've got about 10, 11% above our floor. That's what our figures, that's kind of what we figure. So, you know, punching above your weight and this kind of thing is your main goal. And is for me, it's to make sure you've made an impact. You punch above your weight, you can actually start to create conversations. You can become a legitimate community activist, so to speak.
That Yeah, I'm surprised you did so well with the downtown Sacramento in there. I mean, that's got to be very pro-Democrat, I would
Yeah,
think.
it's Democrat stronghold. Downtown Sacramento is a Democrat stronghold.
Yeah, we got hammered downtown. We did well outside of downtown. We actually won. We won some districts up in Rio Linda and some precincts up in Rio Linda and Alberta. So up in the more rural areas, we did well. We also did well, oddly enough, in some of the older areas, some of them retirement communities, which actually surprised me.
Yeah.
So we did downtown places where the tech and the young people and the yuppies, back in our days, they were called yuppies. We didn't do so well in the millennials group. But people above the millennials, we punched way above our weight. And so we did okay. So
James,
would you call this a moral victory in a sense? Would you call it that?
I call it work. there's not a victory. Victories are, you could say there's a moral victory, yes, but it's work. I learned a lot, and it tells me where to go from here. It helped me design a program to get the local party moving forward. And so it's work. It's education and it's work.
Okay.
James, one of the things I wanted to ask you too is when you were running and you got these thousands of people to vote for you, were you listed as a libertarian on there, or was it? Do they list parties when you're running for?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was listed libertarian. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't run. I didn't do what a lot of libertarians do. They run as a libertarian. Libertarian comes out like every 10th word. I didn't hide from it, but I also didn't talk about it. I talked issues and solutions. I didn't actually sit around and talk a lot of political philosophy. No, wait, actually, I talked a lot of political philosophy, but not party political philosophy. It's just how do we get from here to less intervention and less confusion and simplicity and ethics. Let's get, oddly enough, if you want the biggest issue that I ran on that I found that surprised me was transparency and ethics. My transparency videos, I did a few videos on transparency and they outperformed everything else.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if for those of you out there, transparency is a big thing here in California, regardless of whether it's Democrats, Republicans, independents, everybody likes transparency.
So are you saying this was the biggest issue in your campaign?
Yes. It's not even close.
Wow.
Transparency is the biggest issue, which essentially goes with corruption. If you look at how the state is operated, oh my God. In a sense, it's worse than we think, but it's also better than we think because people are fed up with it, regardless of party. They may not be willing to change the way they vote yet, but they're getting there.
Well, this brings up a question. You mentioned that you ran videos on transparency and ethics. So I guess, doing, I guess these were online webcast videos then, or what kinds of resources, I guess, were you using to reach out to people?
Yeah, well, Joe Biden campaigned from his basement. I campaigned from my garage. Well, it was a combination of COVID and resources.
It's alleged that Joe Biden won, and I don't know. It's alleged that you did not. So there must have been some difference here.
That's all right. I can accept defeat. It's all good. So it doesn't matter.
So it sounds like you were taking full advantage of the internet. Were there other public resources that you found useful in running your campaign?
Well, in terms like that, it's difficult to make judgments this year simply because so much got thrown in the air. Our whole original campaign plan dissolved in March. We were going to use community meetings and use my ability to speak to the public in person. And I just had to change that to go all online. Yeah. And so in terms of like parks and the normal campaigning, we didn't get to do, which in a sense it actually saved us in a way, because I didn't have to try to figure out how do I make $3,500 do 20 different things. I got to make it do 3. And we focused on what we were good at, and it actually paid off. So if there is a lesson to learn for underfunded candidates, is pick 1 or 2 things that you're already good at, focus on that and do that well, rather than try to do a bunch of things you don't do well. Just, pick the 1 or 2 things, focus on that, do well at that, and you can punch above your weight relatively easily. Because the environment is ripe for someone to come in and make noise.
Okay. Well, you mentioned. Oh, sorry. So yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I was just wondering if James, have you ever thought about running as a different party, like a Democrat or Republican, one of the two main parties? Have you ever even given it a thought, or is it because both parties are so far away from you, your philosophy, and libertarian just fits in? Was that the overriding decision-making process for you to run as a libertarian?
Well, the short answer is I love freedom too much to run for one of the other parties. That's the short answer.
All right.
The long answer is yeah, I'm essentially a humanist. I'm not a libertarian because I'm politically, philosophically ideologue. I'm a humanist, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
meaning what? What do you mean by humanist?
It's where the individual human, the rights of the individual human, is what you judge all your ethical judgments on. Base all your ethical judgments on. It's okay. Kind of a comic book version of humanist. It's not a real version of humanist. So no one send me letters saying that's not real humanism. I know. It's my libertarian version of humanism. It's where all my ethical decisions are based upon the individual human rights, essentially. Everything I do is based upon the rights of the individual human. Everything I think about, my perspective starts there. And so in many sense, I'm okay with more government than a lot of libertarians. Not because I like big government, but it's because I accept where we are and I accept that people want it. And okay, fine. How do we get to the more libertarian future in 50, 100 years? Well, you start by the first couple steps, and the first couple steps aren't going to look like they're going to look when you're at the end of the journey. And so I kind of accept that.
Okay.
But James, okay,
yeah.
A little philosophical point here, but if you're telling me that you accept the government as it is,
I don't think that I accept that it exists as it is, and that the path to fixing it is a long, windy road, and it's not going to look libertarian, especially in the beginning steps.
Well, then I'm asking then if your ideology accept that it exists as it is, and it's not going to look very libertarian now, is there a plan? I mean, I don't want you to get too far from what the show is about, but what is the plan to change it? I don't see anything at all about how we're going to steer this ship away from that big iceberg that is sitting out there, which is the rapid destruction of our individual liberties and rights.
Yeah, it's this long, slow conversations, Leon. It's exactly what we're doing right here. It's people like me running for office, having those long, slow conversations about, our individual rights are fundamental. And, you can talk about like the stimulus package, or if government's going to stop people from working, then they damn well have an obligation to make sure they can feed themselves. Now, I wouldn't have stopped the people from working, but it happened. And so now we're going to have to figure out how to make people be able to feed themselves, because until they can get back on their feet, we've knocked people off their feet. It's our moral responsibility to take care of them now. And so, and it's from a humanist perspective, that's my humanist side, right? It's we force a bunch of people into extreme poverty, and the government has forced them in. And so now they have an obligation to make sure that they ameliorate those effects. And so that's not going to look very libertarian at first, but in the long run, it will, because people will say, okay, look, they screwed it up, creating this sick circumstance. And so we cannot do that again, but we still have to fix it, because you can't make a mess and then not fix it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, James, I wanted to get back on the track of practicality for, just running for office, period. Mm-hmm. Suppose somebody was, really interested, they've heard you talk a little bit about this, and they're thinking, man, I'm curious about running maybe as a libertarian in some other county. Where would they go to start looking into what resources are available to them? I mean, would they contact the state Libertarian Party or their local county Libertarian Party, and what resources might they get?
Well, if you're libertarian, the quick answer is you can contact any of them. All the states, the Fed, the national, or your local county can help. They can all kind of plug you in. They all have different resources. I know there's a playbook at the national level where you get like 3 years. I mean, I have my problems with that. I actually think that because all politicians run off essentially the same playbook, it actually accidentally creates corruption. But there is a playbook you can kind of go through. You can go and talk to people who run for office, which is actually the most effective way, is simply to call someone up who's run for office and talk to them about it and see. Talk to a couple different people so you have different perspectives, because some people get jaded after they run for office. Some people get enthused. And so you want to make sure you get a balance.
What category are you in? Jaded
I'm in
or
neither.
enthused?
I'm in neither because I didn't start this the normal way. I didn't do this because I wanted to run for office. I did this because my community asked me to help. And so it's a different thing. I was literally asked to help. I wasn't going to run. This time last year, I was not going to run for office. I had decided it wasn't going to happen. No way in hell. And in January 11th, I had filed for run for office. So it's literally in a 2-week process. My fellow gig workers, had convinced me to run for office simply because they were telling me all their stories. And what are you going to do about it? Literally stopped in the grocery store. What are you guys going to do about AB5? On the way home from recording the show, back when we got to do this in the studio, I'm picking up soda and milk. Someone stops me and asks me, "What are you guys going to do about AB5?" So now I'm here. This is what happens.
Okay. Fair enough.
After this whole process, and it sounds like you've had some interesting experiences. But I guess if people just asked you again, or they said, "Hey, we still got to deal with this AB5," would you be willing to run again the next time if this is still a problem, or are there other problems out there that you've seen as well that you're interested in dealing with in public office?
Well, my personal focus, at least politically, is to do more of this. I'm taking my run for office. I'm actually starting a podcast just for Sacramento, where we're going to talk Sacramento politics, issues, culture, not just politics. We'll talk culture and what's going on, because the journalists, the news media is awful. They don't cover anything. It's one of the things I've learned is that the news media has no interest in actually informing the public about what's going on. They've got whatever their interest is. It's not actually informing the public. I'm not going to make any assumptions of what it is. So I want to do more of that. We're starting to develop a program to help grow the party here in Sacramento County. I won't say I will never run again, because I said that last year, but there are conditions that it would take. Like, I don't want to have to build a team again. So people want me to run. Okay, fine. You're going to have to, who's my campaign manager? Who's my treasurer? There's a handful of things that I'm not going to do because I don't like gathering signatures. I don't raise money. And so there's a few things that if people want me to run again, I might do it, but they're going to have to put stuff in place simply because I'm not going through that again.
Okay.
It's not that I didn't enjoy it. I learned a lot. I grew as a human being. I'm actually a better human being because of the experience. And I don't want anybody to say that I'm not going through that again as it was a negative experience. It wasn't. It was an 11-month emotional roller coaster ride during the thing of COVID. And I just may be kind of emotionally tired, right? In 3 months, I might be feeling better and I might have a slightly different perspective. I will grant that. So that's why I'm not going to give you a hard answer on that. I would doubt that I'm going to run for office again, but I wasn't running last year either. So, what the hell?
Yeah. I think one day I want to run for public office, but my big issue is going to be public education, especially in the inner cities of America. Well, it's going to be in California, so the inner cities are in California.
Yes, school boards are a big thing, and they're needed. And oddly enough, here there was $800,000 spent by two candidates. Each spent about $400,000 for one school board seat.
Wow!
Now, don't let that scare you, Leon, because 2/3 of that money is grift. It's not needed. It's just spent to spend.
Right.
It's just spent to spend. So you can really run an effective campaign on much less than what you think. Okay. Because much of it is grift. It's just paying off people who've sent you campaign contributions or given your party campaign contributions and blah. Oh, yeah, it's awful. It's actually worse. The grift is worse than you think.
Oh, okay.
It sounds like
the corruption and the grifting is actually worse than you think.
Okay.
Sounds like, though, I mean, you were talking about it only having a few $1,000s to run on, essentially. So sounds like you really rely a lot on volunteers then to help you out with your different positions. And you talked about having different staff that would have to be assembled you'd have to have your team, I guess. And so it sounds like that mostly volunteers.
Yeah, we worked all volunteers. We didn't have any paid consultants, but there's a whole industry of paid consultants of paid. Now there is one person who, as on a campaign, you should probably pay if you can. If you have the money, you should pay your treasurer, not your campaign manager, not your messaging consultant. Pay your treasurer. That is the most important person in your campaign. Is your treasurer. Trust me. Pay your damn treasurer if you can.
Well, that sounds like the key lesson, I guess, the key takeaway if you're thinking of running for office here in California. So
yeah, get your staff together and pay your treasurer. Yes, if you can.
All right.
Normally this is about the point in the show where we get to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol. I think we've covered all the things, though. James, is there any other points you wanted to bring out before we move on, or is that
really the biggest point I want to run out is it's a great experience. It really, despite all the issues, despite the emotional, cumbersome, despite all the crap you have to deal with, and I'm sorry, someone's gonna have to edit that. It's a learning experience. Having to reflect that you're representing people who disagree with you, that you're asking people who disagree with you to let you represent them. It's a different level of thought, and I grew as a human being. I'm a better human being now because of it. And don't be afraid because of the money, because most of the money is grift, and you don't actually need that much.
Mm-hmm.
It's so ironical to hear you say that you're a better human being because you run for public office, and I said that, is that when you consider that I consider all politicians to be the scum of the earth, man.
Well, I'm not a politician, Leon. That's the difference.
Yeah. I don't feel like a lot of our national politicians have grown in a good way.
I'm telling you, this is exactly my point.
They ran for office for themselves. I ran for office for my gig workers, and I think that's the difference. People, if they want to be president. I want to be a politician.
I'm not. I'm just.
Yeah, no, I get you. But I think it's a difference. I think there's a difference between when you ask to run by your community and when you want to run.
Yeah,
I think there's actually a mental difference.
Fair enough. I accept that.
Okay. Well, I think on that note, we're almost out of time. I'm not sure if this is going to be used for a public access version, so I don't want to overrun things. But if you're interested in seeing any of our past shows, you can catch them on libertariancounterpoint.com or Facebook Libertarian. And if you're interested as well in potentially being a guest in the future, if you've run for office or had other experiences with COVID shutdowns, or may have lost your job, or the riots or anything else, or you're leaving California, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us at knuckleheads at libertariancounterpoint.com and tell us about it, and if we can, we'll have you on the show. So thanks again, James, for joining us, and thanks all, and have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas all.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everybody.
Take care.
Merry Christmas.
All right then. Bye.